Today, I want to nerd out on the Trail series attention to detail. It's not at all weird for series, especially series in like a shonen tradition, that sort of thing, be it anime, be it superheroes, whatever, to sort of treat their individual people, individual combatants like they're superheroes. They can cleave through tanks, they can push mountains. That's not really weird. What is weird is the series actually having enough attention to detail, attention to how the world needs to work, if that's going to be the case, to account for it? Trails actually treat their high level combatants that, can cleave through tanks, can cut up soldats, can beat up, 100 soldiers, can invade Gransil and, drive back the army, whatever. The world treats them like the world would have to if those level of combatants exist. And that's really cool. And what do I mean like that by that? Well, let's first rewind the clock all the way back to the first game, first chapter for Trails in the Sky. And in Trails in the Sky, we discover that Cassius is leaving the country, heading up to the Empire, so that the plot can happen. So that our protagonist can develop. No, he leaves, and obviously, from a real standpoint, the reason he's leaving is so that Joshua and Estelle don't have that backdrop, don't have that safety, and can actually have an adventure with high stakes. But we later find out in third chapter that what happened is Sarah was up visiting Northumbria, and she gets tied up by an Ouroboros enforcer on the way back. So what happens is Cassius needs to shift up to cover the Erebonian Empire as another enforcer from Ouroboros is bombing various guild branches. So Cassius gets pulled up from Libero to go cover that. At the time, Agate is not an A-rank bracer, so that just leaves Kurt as the only super-powered combatant, superhero effectively, to cover Libero. Now, does Libero have other forces, other defenses besides a single A-rank bracer that they don't even really control? Sure, they've got General Morgan, who is at the time stationed up on the north here. They have Sid. They have a couple other people, a couple things that maybe sort of matter, but they really don't. Again, in the world that the Trail series uses, you would find situations where if we got, I don't know, let's say we'll use Kurt because Kurt's an maybe we won't use Kurt. Let's take an A-rank combatant. And A-rank combatants are pretty translatable between A-rank bracers, enforcers, advanced level practitioners of a martial arts, or dominions. Those are all pretty equivalent. Those are all something that we have sort of understood through the body of evidence belong roughly in the A tier at combatant level. Are they all 100% equal to each other? Might some members of an A rank bracer be better at combat than, say, other A rank bracers who might be worse at combat? Sure. Those absolutely are things that happen, but it's, a bit of a thing. But what we do have some level of consistency is you could get a setup where you have, I don't know, maybe not her, you have Elise, Alicia, Elliot, maybe let's get some more. Lloyd, anyone else? Sure, we can get you in here as well. Let me get someone else here. That's 7. Let me grab a quick 8th. Sure. This is 6 people. I could bring it up to 8. That would be perfectly fine. These are now going to be a case of where we have 8 people who've all had some combat experience, who have all belonged to some form of special ops, be it Class 7, be it the special support section. Those are effectively special ops groups. These guys have a lot of combat experience at this point. You could take the 8 people that I just circled and then go throw them against, let's grab a random A rank combatant. I don't know. Let's grab Head of the Stall Rider. She wins every time. She wins like 9 out of 10 times, no question, even against 8 opponents, because those opponents are just not of her caliber. And that's how this series works. That's why you can have things like when the enforcers invade in Libero there, you have a situation where 4 enforcers can just cut down the entire army trying to defend Gransil, no problem getting to the queen. Okay, cool. So in that world, you sort of have to accept, okay, you have to work around the A rank combatants. In this world, and the S rank combatants. In this world, mostly does, which is really cool. We saw they did this storyline where, they tied up Sarah and then Cassius adjusted, and that was cool. And now we see they've distributed their resources a little bit different in Libero. How did they handle the fact that some of the strongest resources in Libero aren't attached to Libero? They're attached to the guild and can sort of do whatever they want. Well, maybe you get cute and you hire the guild to do things. Hey, Agate, we'd like you to rescue a cat from a tree over here, whatever. Maybe that's a solution. But you also just get to adjust to what they're doing. If you run into a situation where, say, Agate wants to go up here to do a mission and Kurt wants to do up here, you might come up with something that you specifically want to hire someone to do so that the guild sends someone else to cover, so that you've got reasonable deterrent effort in your region. That's something that you might want to do. Or maybe a Risha comes to visit and you go, hey, wait, she's visiting Grancel. We don't know her. We don't trust her. I know. Let's hire Agate to come cover over here. Cool sorts of things. Cool sorts of, hey, this is a little more real to the world. And when you're Libero and you're sort of relying on the guild heavy, you have to do that. You can distribute your next tier resources like Morgan to cover the border, things like that, whatever. But let's look at the Empire. Someone who has a little bit more to play with. And let's start with Victor Arsaid. He is one of the strongest people in the Empire, but I don't believe he's part of the military. Maybe he was. I don't believe he currently is. He's headquartered in Legram. That's where his lands are. That's his territory. And because he's there, they can kind of build around that. The Empire can go, Bardus actually is part of our military. Let's put him over here. Matthias Vander actually is part of our military. Let's put him at the border with Crossbill over here, since that's where a Calvert invasion would come from, and he's one of our absolute strongest combatants. Okay, cool. If Arsaid Victor wasn't here, they might have had to adjust. They might have had to say, hey, let's go ahead and put Van Dyke down here. But they don't have to. They're adjusting to the fact that he does exist and he is there. They don't need anyone else in this region. They don't need someone else in Bererhard. They don't need someone in Legram. They don't need one of the Empire's strongest warriors. Doesn't need to be stationed in this region because there's already a deterrent effect there, which is pretty cool. Now, it's a little more complicated than that. Obviously, you get into it. You maybe don't have perfect control of Victor. You'd have some degree because he is a noble. Governments do tend to have controls of their nobles, at least in the time frame that this series is pretending to take place in. But then we get some other stuff here. It makes sense to have one of their strongest on the border. Why is the North so weak? Why is the North so weak? Does this break my theory? Is Falcom not actually paying attention to detail with their writing? No, they still kind of are. Nord is their closest ally. Nord is basically the Empire's only really good ally, and they don't really feel the need to put a super strong combatant there. Now, they did put a Vander up there, but not one of the advanced strong Vanders. And some people would disagree with me. Some people would say, no, people who have ranks like Lieutenant General or Colonel or whatever, these are all strong. All high-ranked military members are strong in the Trails world. I disagree. I find the evidence for that is very, very thin. For example, the reason Gaius got into Thor's military academy, Gaius grew up in Nord, is because he saved our Vander, who was a lieutenant general up here, who, is heading up this base on the border. He saved him from a wild beast encounter when he was physically in trouble. And again, if we go back to how combat works in the Trails world, if he was an A-rank combatant, there's just no way that Kid Gaius, who would have been, D, maybe C, probably D at the time, would have made any difference in a fight that A-rank combatant was losing. But we do know that our Vander up here, One-Eyed Zex, is one of about the 5 leaders of the military. He's like a top 5 position in the Erebonian military, while being weak enough that Gaius, Kid Gaius, can be a difference maker, not A-tier Dominion guys. So, okay, that makes sense. He's, that's something that's a little bit weaker here. This is their strongest ally. So we see they've got someone weaker stationed up here. They do still have a fair amount of military presence up here, not strong people, and strong people are what matters the most, but they distributed their people pretty tightly around the capital and then around the portions of the country that are a little bit more in danger from less friendly allies. That kind of makes sense. As well as You got really heavy mountains up here. Rumfuria is not going to be able to invade with any sort of ground-based military through here. They have to go around and go through Northumbria. They have to go through this snow. Ground-based invasion from the north, really, really not practical. Now, could a superpowered combatant just sneak their way through? Could we get something where like an Aurelia equivalent sneaks their way through the mountains, through Ymir, down into the Empire? Sure you could. But there's just no way to prevent that. And that still sort of makes sense. You would distribute your resources, these really, really strong people, as best you can to respond to disasters, to respond to Ouroboros or other terrorist attacks, to be a deterrent to invasion, to do all these things. But there just isn't a way to stop someone sneaking through the mountain pass, to stop an individual crossing the border, etc. So you don't go, oh, I know, let's try to have Aurelia, for example, patrol the mountains with our close ally here. That just doesn't make sense. And because it doesn't make sense, because you sort of go, hey, what can actually be done, the distribution here works out pretty darn well, especially once you turn Jirai into a member of the Empire and basically same thing with Northumbria. So, you know, those conquered by the Empire, joined the Empire, okay, that fine. Now, after that happens, should there probably be someone a little bit more up here? Maybe not Aurelia, but maybe, you know, someone like that. Yes, obviously can't be Muller because Muller's tied up looking after the prince, the only prince remaining at this point, who we've mostly got stationed around Heimdall. But yeah, that's kind of cool. Anyway, that's really what I wanted to cover. I put Zin in here, but it doesn't really matter. We don't really know how Calvard's distributed itself around its strong combatants. We obviously can't really place Joshua and Estelle either. They're moving around too much, and Libero can't factor them in. When they're home, they'd obviously be over here, which looks pretty good for Libero, but they're not home often enough. They spent a bunch of time in Crossbell, spent some time in Erebonia, and may now be back in Libero, or may find their way into Calvert. We will see. Or maybe they're up in Rumfuria. Maybe they're further east. Maybe they're back in Artaria. We don't know. Similar thing with the members of Class 7 that matter from a strong combatant perspective. Obviously, Reen could be working at the branch campus over here. That's fine. But he might also be wandering. He's a big enough profile that it's easy for the Empire and intelligence divisions to track where he is and potentially move other resources around to adjust for that, because he, will still act as a deterrent. He is going to respond to trouble. Oh, there's the guild branches are being bombed, as an example. He's going to go try to help with that sort of thing. But someone like Emma's basically going to be invisible to them. They may know, intelligence divisions may know that she is quite strong, that she, will probably respond to threats, but she's going to be too hard to track just because she doesn't have an entourage. She's not famous. People will see Reen and talk about it, and he becomes trackable. Emma disappears and teleports, and it's just not really practical to factor around her most of the time. Very similar thing with Gaius, jumping around in a super fast airship as a member. Maybe he'll hang out up here, but moves around too quickly. Laura, on the other hand, is more like Reen, is going to be a little bit higher profile. Home base may be here, but she's traveling. As she is traveling, that's mostly good news for the Empire. And they get to go, okay, we can move things around as a result of where she is to keep our strength reasonably distributed. But let me know what you think. Am I totally off base here? Is this not at all well thought out? Is this not at all, oh, hey, they did factor in that these characters are basically superheroes, and if that's how combat works and militaries work, these are sort of more important than the tanks and the airships, and they did factor this stuff in, they didn't factor this in. Am I way off base, or have I sort of hit the target and Falcom kind of realized this and has continued, at least through CS4, to do a pretty good job of it? I think things got a little wackier in CS4 and Reverie. But hey, let me know what you think. Totally on base, totally off base. Give your thoughts in the comments down below. And what other cool things have they just been wildly attention to detail on? These games play more like a long-running fantasy epic than they do a video game, and I think that's great. Let me know in the comments down below. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks. Temporal out.